Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Meditation Tuesday, and tonight we will have Jim speaking on breathing techniques. And then after that, John and myself will just speak briefly on that topic as well. And then we'll open it up to questions and comments from the group. And followed by a poem, meditation, and then breakout rooms for small groups from anywhere from like 4 to 6 people. So with that, Jim, you can take it away.
Okay, all right, thanks, Xhalr. So this is not intended to be a full treatise on the subject. So you could go to a week-long retreat probably and not cover all the different breathing techniques that are out there. But I'm going to share some of the things that I do that I find the most helpful, and I think it's a kind of a reasonable survey of the topic. I apologize, there's a cat that wants some attention. So if you hear a cat meowing in the background, that's outside my door. So the first question is, why do we focus on the breath? And I think this may have been covered in that 8-week class we covered at the beginning or in some other meetings. But and the main reason really is that the breath is just always with you. So you could be, in a one of those floating chambers, totally isolated, and still have your breath. And so you can always come back to it. And it's rhythmic and something that you can pay attention to. And because it's part of the autonomic nervous system, it goes on its own without you having to control it. But you can also control it as well. So you can override your autonomic nervous system and control your breath, and then you can release control and it will return to natural breathing. So it gives you some interesting flexibility. So one of the first things that we learn to do in meditation, it's also very popular in yoga, is abdominal breathing. So using your diaphragm to expand your belly as you breathe, rather than your upper lungs. And there's some evidence that this actually has some benefits as well, although I'm not going to get into the science of it. And as our speaker last week, Deborah, was it, she mentioned that if you watch a baby sleeping, they naturally are breathing with their abdomen, and that's just part of our nature. And so we kind of override that as we get older. We start breathing with our lungs up here rather than our abdomen. So learning to just do abdominal breathing is something that you may have to practice deliberately at first, but then it becomes second nature after a while. The other thing is, during meditation, you can do some things with your breath in terms of observation. So one is counting your breaths. That's a very good method that can be an introductory technique or something that you can fall back on if you find your mind wandering. But the other is just following your breath very deliberately all the way, the full inhale, and then the full exhale all the way to emptying your lungs. And rather than just counting, say the top of the inhale and waiting for the next top of your inhale, just actually paying attention to everything all the way through the cycle. And that you may be paying attention to the movement of the air through your nose, or as it escapes over your lips, or it could be feeling the muscles of your abdomen move. And some people like to actually place a hand on their abdomen and actually feel their abdomen moving as well, again, to stay connected to it. So these are some things you can do just built around just the concept of observing your own breath. Another thing on the side of controlling your breath that are things that are kind of interesting is when you think about what happens if someone were to startle you. Very often it's either a gasp, sudden gasp, or an exclamation, a sudden breath movement, or maybe followed by rapid, short breathing. And this actually is associated with kind of the stress result that comes out of that. So your body is actually breathing in a way that corresponds to the stress incident. Likewise, if you think about, say, having a massage, whether it's on a massage table or just sitting in a chair and having a friend massage your shoulders, you might find yourself exhaling slowly, maybe with an audible sigh. And that's an expression of relaxation. So although those breath examples are expressions of stress or relaxation, you can do the opposite as well, in the sense that you can use your breath to actually trigger the corresponding response. If you were to suddenly shriek and then have short breathing, you could actually have a stress response in your body. Likewise, if you take slow, deep breath, especially on the exhalation, maybe even accompanied with some sound, you can trigger this stress relief in your body. So breathing as a way to relieve stress is something that's been proven to be effective. So you're actually tricking your body into feeling like you are relaxing, you are relieving stress. And that's an important part of breathing during meditation as well. Especially the slow exhale, they found that just slowing down your exhale, it by itself does a lot to reduce stress. And one of the things that I've found is that there's a couple of ways of doing that. One is you can use the muscles of your lungs to slow down the exhale, but you're actually then not really relaxing if you do that. Now, if you inhale and then just relax, it's a fairly quick exhale. But you can limit that without using the muscles of your lungs by just simply pursing the lips. So if you're blowing out a candle, you slow it down by just limiting how much air can escape at a given time. So your lungs themselves can relax naturally, but the air just moves out a little bit more slowly. Another way you can do it is like you're fogging up a mirror. So you constrict the back of your throat slightly, and even if you're breathing through your nose, it ends up constricting the exhale a little bit. So if you inhale and then exhale, if you listen to the sound that I make, I'm just relaxing my lungs, but because I'm constricting a little bit, it's slowing down the air as it comes out to extend that exhale. And you can do actually that on the inhale as well. So you can inhale and have slight constriction. Now, you might notice that sounds familiar if you ever listen to somebody sleeping. That's the sound we make naturally when we're sleeping, when we're in our most relaxed state. So that's another example of using kind of a conscious effort to induce kind of this natural, very relaxed breathing with a slight amount of air constriction. So I'm covering a lot of stuff kind of quickly, but these are each examples of things that you can incorporate into your own breathing techniques. And one of the things that I found personally is that when I do a little bit of air constriction, especially on the exhale, it not only allows me to slow down that exhale breath with full relaxation of my lungs muscles themselves, but it also allows me to more consciously follow the breath all the way down. And even a little bit of sound with little constriction on the inhale allows me to follow it very deliberately all the way up as well. So you've got that extra little feedback in the process of breathing that lets you follow it very, very clearly. And so all these things are just ways of, again, enhancing your focus on the breath, kind of relieving your mind from the other distractions that you might otherwise have. So another couple things I wanted to talk about when it comes to breathing techniques is kind of some deliberate structured breathing. So one example is what they call square breathing, where you have a specific length of inhale. Usually it's like a count of 4. You hold your breath for 4, and then you exhale for a count of 4, and then you hold your lungs empty, or at least in the relaxed empty state. You don't have to exhale every breath of air, but you hold it at 4 again, and then inhale. So it goes something like this. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, etc. And you just count in your head. 1, 2, inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. And after a little bit, you don't even necessarily have to count, but it's kind of an even pattern of inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And often when I feel a little bit stressed, whether it's just in the car driving, or my mind's just very busy when I lay down in bed at night, I'll just do that square breathing exercise for several cycles. And that's enough to bring my whole body into relaxation, kind of let go of everything. And then I can just return to normal breathing, and I'm much more relaxed. And then there's some variations on that. So lengthening the exhale, for example, doing an inhale of 4, hold it 4, and then exhale for a count of 6. And then if you're not comfortable holding the exhale at 4 counts, you can just do a 2 count exhale. So it becomes a 4, 4, 6, 2. One I like to do is also maybe start there, and then as I'm becoming a little bit more relaxed, I'll extend my exhale even more. So I'll maybe do an inhale of 6, a little longer, hold for 4, and then do a longer exhale of a count of 8 using that air constriction technique, and then hold it 4 at the bottom. So it's a little bit deeper breath and a little bit longer exhale. So that's like a 6-4-8-4 pattern. And this may sound really advanced. I'm going to show you something during the meditation today that you can play around with that makes this a little easier. And then the final topic I had written down, which is something that I like to do when I have a very, very short time, like maybe it's 5 minutes before a presentation, and I just want to kind of get my mind set and relax. And that's something called alternate nostril breathing. And it sounds a little weird, but it's surprisingly effective, especially if you don't have a lot of time. And the way it works is you're going to close off nostrils alternately as you breathe. So the best position is to take your 2 fingers and hold them on the bridge of your nose. And then your thumb's going to be able to block your right nostril, and your ring finger blocks your left nostril. And so with a very light touch, you can close off one or the other. And so the idea is you breathe in through one nostril and then out through the other, and then back in through that nostril and then out through the other. So it looks like this. I'm going to close my right nostril, breathe in through the left, and then out. Close this and breathe out through the right, and then inhale back into the right. Close, switch out through the left. I think, well, how could something so simple be effective? But it is surprising. So if you just do that for a few minutes and then stop, you might be surprised at how different you feel in that very brief breathing exercise. So if you only have 3 to 5 minutes for a meditation, just try that sometime and see how you feel. So those are the few techniques that I wanted to share. So I'm gonna hand it over to Taylor and Jonathan, and maybe share some techniques you like or comments on those.
Great. John, do you want to go ahead and share, and I'll go after you?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I mentioned before that sort of the large chunk of my time meditating was simply doing the counting the breath practice, which is about as simple as it sounds. And I did that for a number of years, and I got a lot of benefit out of it. So I think that there's a lot to breathing, and every time I'm meditating, I'm always sort of thinking about breath in some way when I'm going into it. I think there's a number of ways you can look at it. I definitely recommend the box breathing technique, as well as the sort of, I feel like it's sort of like people can find their different things. I could sort of share one thing that I've been doing recently that I found is actually had really good health benefits for me, and that's I practice the Wim Hof method, which is sort of like a more physical sort of breathing that's based on Tumo breathing, which is sort of like an ancient breathing practice, and it involves like a lot of breath holding. But I think just in general, my take on breathing is there's sort of like a very deep connection between how we breathe and how our mind is. And I think that's something to keep in mind when we're exploring all these methods, that it's sort of like this very, very primitive tool that we can access. And that's all I'm going to share. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jim. So I guess the main thing that I want to focus on here really briefly with breathing techniques is that it's been most beneficial for me because in doing a breathing technique over an extended period of time, what you understand is what your kind of normal breathing rhythm is. And when, kind of like what Jim said, when you become startled or when you're particularly relaxed or when something excites you or stimulates you in your environment, the first thing to change is your breath. So if you have this understanding of what your kind of like normal or what your like baseline is for your breath, that alone gives you a lot of information to work with, even just from there. So then for me, it's kind of like this really, because your breath is always with you, like Jim said, it's this really easy bridge or gap that you can kind of like bridge to carrying your meditation practice into your everyday life. And so for me, when I'm doing the breathing technique, what I focus on is just natural breath. And that is because when you're focusing on the natural breath, then that's where your kind of awareness of your own particular breath and your acceptance of your own particular breath instead of controlling your breath. Whereas you kind of like, recognize that your breath is faster than you want it to be, or you want to calm yourself down. So then you do those techniques. Those are all well and good. And in fact, because I kind of have this better like awareness of my breath now as I just kind of move through my everyday life, then when this goes back to what Jim says too, it's kind of when I'm in a situation and my breath changes, when I'm not meditating and when I'm just going through my life, I can just be like, oh, I'm excited right now. And then I just like take a deep breath, and that then becomes much more habitual for me. So so I guess like one, it's kind of like a rhetorical question, but it's kind of something that I like bounce around in my head. And, if people want to comment on it in the, in the discussion or anything, like you should feel free to. But yeah, so I guess one thing in general, what I think about in meditation and that I think comes out in breathing techniques is, should we be in pure observation? So should we be observing like our natural breath, our natural body sensations, and not, for lack of a better word, kind of either controlling or manipulating the natural state in a certain way? Because like some techniques are like, okay, let's intentionally, let's pick a mantra, let's sing, let's dance, let's move in this special way. And so my question is kind of like, you have like very broadly these kind of two categories of like, you have kind of this like activity or this kind of like controlled thing that you're doing. And then you also have this other very broad category of like just natural awareness. So one thing that I think about in my head is like, well, if the point of meditation and these things that we're doing is to relieve our suffering, can we actually do that when we're controlling our breath or when we're not focusing on our natural state? Because in that, are we in essence masking or avoiding the feeling instead of being with it and allowing it to be and making friends with it and knowing it much, much better? And it's also been my experience that the relief comes in in the pure awareness and in the natural state, and then knowing that better, and then kind of all of the anxiety, fear, frustration, all these things that arise in kind of observing our natural state dissipate, because I now, in observing it, have a new relationship to it. But there's all these, other techniques that that suggest something entirely different. So that's something I kind of think about when I'm moving through my day, or when I'm just considering like different techniques and practices. So I will end there, and now we'll move into the question and comment portion. So we will.
I'm interested to hear other people's, if you don't have a question, but you have some experience with breath techniques that you've found helpful, please share those as well.
So first, why don't we start with Zia? You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then followed by Mandy and Joseph.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I just wanted to know if you have any recommendations for any books. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't actually. I haven't learned meditation from books. It's mostly been from live events and classes. But I don't know, Taylor, Jonathan?
I think in terms of books that are like specifically related to breathing techniques, I don't know of like one that specifically focuses on that, but I do know some that involve it partially that I think are very approachable. One is Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. We actually went through that book really early on in Meditation Tuesdays, and he just offers like a really accessible approach to breathing techniques. And as you read the book, there's different exercises that he'll just be like, okay, let's pause for a minute or two and do this. So I think that's really good for this type of work. I think Sam Harris, we also, I think, went over that in a meetup earlier as well. He has a book called Waking Up that talks about meditation, a lot of different aspects of meditation that could also be useful. And Eckhart Tolle also has other books in the meditation sphere that you can read. Yeah, John, do you have anything to offer?
Thank you.
Waking Up by Sam Harris is good. Power Now is really good. I just sort of listened to an audiobook on more like yogic breathing techniques and sort of like some of their health benefits, which I think is sort of tangentially related to meditation, but it was a really interesting book. It was called Breath by The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. I think for meditation, it's sort of interesting because it's like the simplest thing to learn, but it's like the most complicated thing to master. So you don't necessarily need to read a book to get started, but I think sort of you can search around and find something that speaks to you, because there's so many different perspectives on it.
So I wanted to
Thank you.
ask specifically about overcoming emotions. And I think what I found is most meditation practices and teachings don't really focus on overcoming emotions. It's really about more, recognizing your emotions, becoming more in touch with the emotions being part of who you are, maybe becoming friendlier to them or something. It's like I think overcoming maybe is not the right goal. Everyone's a little different, but for me personally, just when I began to understand, that emotions are often a physical response that your mind is then reacting to, and you've got chemicals going on in your body, this electrical signals, you got your amygdala active, and all these things that once I understood kind of the physical aspects and dimension of emotions, it became easier for me to live with them, right? So I got emotion happening. I could observe it as, oh, this is what's happening in my body. This is why. And I could prevent kind of a runaway emotional response to the emotion, if you know what I mean. So I think, learning how your body responds and becoming aware of that can help you have a kind of a healthier relationship to your own emotions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Next is Mandy. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Mandy.
Actually, I forgot to plug in my headphones here because I think my computer is not working. But yeah, sorry for joining in late. I actually just saw it like last minute. When was the last time I ever had a panic attack? I think before COVID, I had a panic attack. I try not to focus on like the last times I have panic attacks, because sometimes I think that just like psychs me into having another one, and I try not to keep track of it. But from what I can remember, when they just come out of the blue, I sort of kind of feel as though when I do try to I try to remind myself, like, okay, this is a panic attack. You're not having a heart attack, for one. And then I try to focus on my breathing and not try to automatically force it to slow down, because that will just makes my insides all tied up, even more, and all the other physiological symptoms that comes with anxiety happens when you're so tense up. But I was just wondering, like, from anybody else who, have panic attacks or anxiety attacks or whichever, is that what you guys do? You try to focus on your breathing and just ride the waves?
I don't have a lot of experience with panic attacks, and I don't really feel qualified to speak on this, but if John or Jim have anything to share.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a panic attack either. So, sorry.
Yeah,
I
can't
have a
say that-
question.
Well, one second, Zia. We're going to go through the list, and then if we have time for more questions, we'll come back around. But right now, we're just doing. Everyone's going to ask one question, and we'll just have like a response, no follow-ups, and then we'll check in with the time and see if we can come back.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have experience with panic attacks too, but I think I draw a distinction between like meditation as a practice and meditation as like a cure for an ailment, right? So like you can think of meditation as like a practice, almost like going to the gym or something, right? But if you have like a broken leg or something, right, you're not necessarily going to go to the gym. So there may be breathing techniques you can do when you're having a panic attack, although I can't speak to that. But in general, when we're talking about meditation practice, we're sort of talking about in a daily practice, sort of analogous to an exercise. So I hope that sort of draws that distinction. And I think someone here wants to respond, Sarah, that may have something relevant. So, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mandy. I have panic attacks, and I'm also a psychologist, so I've studied this topic extensively and also treated people who have panic attacks. And so it can depend on the type of panic attack that you're having, like what the cause of it is. So I'll say from my personal experience that I have blood injection injury type panic, or I have panic attacks related to things like medical procedures, like getting my blood drawn, or I often have them at the dentist office. And for those type of causes for panic attacks, breathing heavily can actually make it worse. So what is recommended is that you like clench your muscles. I'll clench my hands or like my toes and focus on that. And instead of trying, because you can hyperventilate, and especially if it can cause you to pass out, especially if you're getting your blood drawn. So you're already in the middle of a medical procedure. So that I've found to be helpful for when I'm at the dentist office and I'm feeling a panic attack coming on. If you, for something like, also I get it for like claustrophobia, closed spaces. For both the medical type blood injury injection and for claustrophobia, if I can get some moving air around me, like being hot, it tends to exasperate it. So if I have on long sleeves, like I never, when I go to the doctor to get blood drawn, if it's in the winter or something, I never wear a heavy sweater, or I wear layers so that I can take off. I can just have like a t-shirt on when I'm, getting blood drawn so that I'm not overheated. So that could also, breathing heavily could also make you feel hotter. And so in certain cases, I don't know what type of panic attacks that you have, Mandy, but
it's a mixture.
okay.
I'm just a mess.
Causes are, but it really does depend, and you have to figure out what works best for you in certain situations. Learning to breathe, you can always try to practice different breathing techniques and to see if that would be helpful to you. But it does depend on the situation and what the causes of the panic attacks are.
I find it just, I don't know if I'm just lazy because I'm trying to get myself into a pattern of meditating, and that's why I hear from everybody. It's like, oh, meditate. And then maybe it will come a little bit more naturally for when stuff does hit the fan, so that's why I was just wondering if anybody else have the same experience. And I think, trying to remember back, like recently I went in for an MRI, and I ended up with a panic attack, so I wasn't able to get the MRI done. But like obviously there's other things, but yeah, I think I've noticed that I have myself take deep breaths and try to slow down my breathing, but I just wondered if that was, that would actually cause more issues mentally or physically.
That is one reason that I am trying to learn to meditate, to reduce anxiety and to help manage panic attacks better. So there are, for an MRI, like if you can practice meditating and being in kind of a quiet and closed space for 30 minutes at a time, then that might help you to get through an MRI. And they allow you to have music and stuff usually as well, which could help. But you do have to figure out what works best for you. And it doesn't happen, like with meditation and learning to use that in that situation, it's not going to happen overnight either. So it's a practice.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks,
Thank
Mandy.
you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Joseph, Alex, and Kaiten. And just a reminder to just ask your question briefly, and we're not going to have follow-ups. So Joseph, go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks guys. Thank you for your presentation this evening as well. I had a couple questions, but I'll just go with one in particular. How do you go about developing a baseline of your breathing so that you have an understanding of actually when it's off and when it's not? Like, do you focus on capturing like what your breath is during meditation, and that's kind of your baseline as to, what you should be breathing or how you should be breathing? Or is it during the day throughout your normal routine? I mean, normally you wouldn't do it through exercise, or obviously because it's going to be a little bit more stressful. You might use a technique to correct it. But I was wondering if there's any specific approaches that you use in order to develop that baseline to become more self-aware as to when your breathing may be off.
Right, and that's a great question, Joseph. And what I would say to that is that so you can understand your baseline of breath in in like a formal meditation where you like set time aside and say, I'm going to meditate for 5-10 minutes, however long, and then just in that period just watch your breath and it's kind of like in doing that practice over an extended amount of times. I mean, sometimes you'll be excited about something, your breath will be faster. Sometimes you'll be more relaxed, the breath will be slower. And just kind of, it's in doing it kind of over an extended period of time that you'll begin to understand like the nuances of your own breath. And again, just like allowing your breath to be naturally whatever it is. And even like in that, the time that you allot yourself that you're going to watch your breath, it will, change in that time. Maybe it'll start slow and then it'll become fast and slow again. And, a range of things can happen. So yeah, I would say it's kind of like in the formal practice itself. And then what you're doing then is you're kind of like retraining your brain to be aware of the breath because you're taking that time away to do that. So then you might find that when you're in your everyday, you're not like explicitly or like very like acutely aware, but if something drastic happens, like you'll pick up on that sooner and be able to address that and just know that something is off and that you can slow down and you can not be reactive to that because now you have this greater understanding of like the way you respond to your stimuli. So next is Alex. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
No, I was just wondering about the physical versus the kind of abstract. I mean, you say watch the breath. What does that mean exactly for people? Is that an intellectual idea of what the breath is? Or is that, for me, I mean, it really helps. So I try and do meditation to actually feel the stomach move up and down. And that for me is a much more calming experience in that it focuses on movement and on the physical. And I think this might help when we talked a little bit about anxiety, that even if you're just feeling the kind of palpitations of your heart, that's actually quite a calming, I don't know, kind of a calming, rather than sort of think in your head, well, what's the breath exactly? How, I don't know if that's clear. I don't know.
I'll take that one. Yeah, I think watch is the wrong word, right? So it is paying attention to the breath or things that can be representations of your breathing. So you mentioned the movement of your abdomen or whatever. That is exactly it. So if that's the thing that is easiest for you to connect to, then that's the thing that you pay attention to. For other people, it's the movement of air, through their nostrils or the sound of their breathing. If you wear headphones, for example, you really hear your breath very loudly sometimes. If paying attention to your heart beating works for you, that's another thing you can pay attention to. You can't override it as easily as you can your breath. Maybe that's a good thing. So paying attention to is the key word. And so watch is often you hear that as a synonym, but yeah, you can't really watch it. Now I will say though that I have actually practiced some techniques in guided meditation where the guide will tell you to imagine the air you're breathing in is one color and the air you're breathing out is a different color. Like breathe in, golden light or air, and then breathe out gray air, something like that. So as a visualization technique, that can be interesting. You're not actually watching it; you're just imagining different colors. I don't know what that does either, but it's interesting. But yeah, your point is very well taken. Whatever works for you, and if it's a movement of muscles or body parts, that's fine too.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah. So our last question is from Kaiten.
Hi. Is it too late to respond to Mandy?
No?
Go ahead.
Hmm?
Go ahead. You can
Okay.
respond.
The reason is that, you know, only recently, and I'm over 50, I started getting panic attacks. And I'm a musician, so I've had many incidents. Many musicians get these kind of issues, but I never did. But only recently, not only me, but two other people that I know are very close to me, they started getting panic attacks. At first, I didn't know what it was because I couldn't breathe. Anyway, so first line of defense for me, at least, the doctor prescribed some emergency meds, like as needed, like a hydroxyzine. So I try not to use any medications, but that's just like the first line of defense for me. And then now, when I'm not, I'm more aware of my stress inducers, and I really haven't found them yet, but I'm changing my lifestyle. Like, for example, coming to here, learning about breathing, and I'm going to be more mindful of it, but also learning about it. Like, for example, reading the the rule 1 of the Jordan Peterson's 12 rules of life. That really helped me because he really identified where anxiety, the triggers, the positive loop back, that kind of thing. So to be aware of it, I start talking to myself. If I started having one of these, I do that. And also like nighttime, 9 p.m. is when I'm gonna be stopping everything, phone, anything screen. Because, I think like everybody's worried about COVID, election, everything, and some people cannot handle it as well. So I turn all that off, and I would do the meditation, breathing, reading. And somebody in a previous meetup, they also suggested like reading Psalms. So I actually started reading Psalms, and I find it very comforting too, because like it kind of says things like, "Oh, help me through all my troubles," and that kind of thing. It has a really good theme. So that I find those helpful because I don't want to be doing it. So I hope this helps.
Thanks, Kaiten. So now we'll move to
Yeah, Zia wanted to ask a question before we move on to the next. Is that okay?
Okay, go ahead, Zia.
Thank you so much for taking time to answer everyone's questions. So I just wanted to hear, maybe you can provide some guidance from your personal experiences. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I had to put my cat in the room, sorry. So I just wanted to know, what do you recommend when you are feeling anxious or when feelings of, I don't know, fear, anger come to you when you're in your meditation state?
Keep meditating. It's part of the gig.
I welcome it because I don't experience a lot of strong emotions. So if I sense emotions, I kind of flow with it. I observe it. I watch it pass through my consciousness, if you will, without judgment. That's my approach.
Like if you're anxious about a certain, like it could be with an argument with someone or something that pertains to your job, like you're very worried about that.
Okay, so that's an example of basically either living in or thinking about the past or the future, right? So one of the things in meditation is being in the present. So if I catch myself and like a raw emotion of happiness, sadness, or fear, independent of any particular perceived future event or reliving a past event is one thing. But if you find yourself, perceiving a future event, a conversation you expect to have, or an altercation or something, or you're reliving a past one, that's a good opportunity to recognize the thought, bring yourself back to the breath, focus on the present. For me personally, what I find is that I spend a lot of time in the left side of my brain. So language, words, analytical thinking. And when I recognize words in my meditation, I try to immediately just refocus on the breath and let those things evaporate. in other words, it's okay for me to think about concepts, love and forgiveness and compassion, and if I see colors, that's fine too. But if it's words, that for me is a trigger that okay, I'm getting into less of my brain. I'm getting into something that's a conversation that's telling me a story, and I'm gonna like bring myself back to the present. And this is an extreme example, but if you have a sentence going through your mind, then you basically are already predicting the end of the sentence. You're already thinking about the future, and you listen to the past of that, even that one sentence. And so to be completely present in the present, you shouldn't have a conversation going on in your head. So it's a difficult thing, but that's something that I just become aware of. When I kind of hear words in my head, or a conversation with another person that I'm imagining, then I try to recognize that as soon as I can, and then come back to the breath, stay in the present, focus on other sensory inputs, sounds, and just stay in that present moment of what's happening. That's me.
Thanks, Sia. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
So now we'll.
Oh, okay. I was going to say
John.
something. That's okay.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, one thing I try to do, so like it's inevitable. Like, so if emotions are coming up or thoughts, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That's something to like really stress. It probably means you're doing it right. So don't get discouraged. I mean, there is sort of like this preconception that you're going to be tranquil and things, but that's really almost like a side effect. Really, when you look at like a lot of the teachings of meditation, it's actually really with the intent of letting these things surface and sort of dissipate. One thing I try to do personally is sort of change my relationship to the sensations of these thoughts. So you can think of thoughts or emotions as senses, just like body sense. And they could be pleasurable or painful, but there really is no difference between pleasure and pain in the grand scheme of things. It's just a relationship to it. So if you can, let's say you're having a disturbing thought or a thought that keeps coming up, you could try for a moment just to say, instead of saying, instead of like trying to like work out the problem the thought is like bringing up, like trying to logically solve it, just sort of trying to sense it and experience it. And I found sometimes that helps me sort of flip the script, and can actually be a moment of growth. So it's sort of your space to play with. So I try to use it as an opportunity to like work with a relationship of what's arising. And so the most difficult thoughts or things are so annoying, but they're also that opportunity at the same time.
Okay, thanks everyone. So now we'll go to a poem reading, and Izzy couldn't make it tonight, so I'll go ahead and read a poem and I'll post it in the chat so you can follow along if you'd like. So this poem is called The Paradoxical Commandments. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win friends, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. Kentem Keith. So from here, we'll go to Jim, who's going to lead us in a breathing meditation, and then we'll go to breakout rooms.
Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different. And your participation in the novelty part of this is completely optional. So just to give you a heads up, we're going to start with our eyes closed, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit of guided meditation, and then I'm going to have you open your eyes, and I'm going to share something on the computer. I'll give you an introduction before we start, and then we're going to do that for 5 minutes, and then have you close your eyes again, and I'll wrap up with a little bit of follow-up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to start. There's a website, Xhalr, spelled oddly Xhalr, which is basically a meditative breathing app, a breathing aid, visualization aid for breathing, and it allows you to set some different things, like you can do square breathing, 4-4-4. It has pranayama, which is popular in yoga, and a few others. But anyway, like the default here is breathe in for 4, hold for 0, breathe out for 6, hold for 8. So I'm going to tweak this a little bit. We're gonna do a kind of a modified square. So breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 6, and then hold for 2. And as I indicated, we're going to start eyes closed. So this is just going to play in the background. Now, if you decide you don't want to use this aid at all, just keep your eyes closed, and you can do your own exercise in your head. And if you want to change the count, if you want to do square breathing of 4-4-4-4, you can. If you don't want to do any of that at all and just listen to your own breath, that's fine too. But it's something to be said for doing a collective exercise together, and we can talk about it. So, so let's just start by getting comfortable, closing your eyes. Get grounded in your seat. Feel the floor against your feet and your hands in your lap or on your thighs. Relax your shoulders. Have a straight spine. And just notice your breath to start. Is it a little bit choppy? Do you feel your heart beating? Just kind of notice the character of it. Try to use the abdominal breathing technique as part of just your natural breathing cycle. Okay, now open your eyes, and we're going to work together on the kind of semi-square breathing. So it's on the exhale cycle. Hold for 2, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale for 6, and then I'm going to be quiet and just let everybody go ahead and follow the pattern. All right, close your eyes again. Allow your breath to return to normal. And now notice the character of your breath. Is it different? Is it smoother? Is your heartbeat any different if you notice it? Is your awareness of the inputs, your sensory inputs, sound and sight, any different than when you started? Is there a difference in your thoughts and or emotions that you observe? Now go ahead and open your eyes. And thank you.